Hello, my name is Rebecca.
And I'm Rachel. So we just watched Frozen 2.
Yes, and we have many thoughts about many things that we feel should have been done better.
I so badly wanted to like this movie, and I feel like I could have liked it a lot if it had just done some other things with what they had.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that the first movie, even though it got overplayed and overhyped, it was genuinely a good movie, which is part of the reason why it was so loved.
It just had a really strong story.
Right, and that's what this one is lacking, a story that is strong. They come into this movie knowing that everyone in the world has seen Frozen. Usually with a sequel, they try and make it so that you could watch the second one without having watched the first one and still understand what's happening. And while they did do a lot of recaps of the first one, most of them are inside jokes with the audience about the first one. Like the guy who works at a little shop is in the town. He shouldn't be there.
The yoo-hoo guy.
Yeah. He does not live in Arendelle.
No.
He lives
in some sauna cabin trading post.
Right, in the middle of nowhere.
In the mountains.
Right, but now he's just in Arendelle. I guess maybe they went back and invited him, but what about his small business and his family?
His small family?
Yeah.
A large family,
Large family. So that doesn't make sense. They obviously just wanted you to see every character.
Yes, that is exactly what they wanted to do.
The freaking trolls. Completely unnecessary. They just come out so they can say things we already know, and so that you can see that the trolls still exist.
Yeah, they were only there for exposition purposes.
The trolls were a plot point in the first movie. They are the most forgettable part of the first movie.
They integrated them better in the first one. So why is this happening now? The whole first movie happened, and she's not hearing this singing. And then suddenly she starts hearing this singing, and is this right after the first movie?
Usually in a movie where something like this changes, there's something that triggers the change.
Right.
There is nothing that triggers the change. So if supposedly she has been hearing this voice, why wasn't she hearing it when she lived alone in her room for 10 years?
Right.
That would be, you think, when she would be the most lonely.
She would have heard this her entire life. I always heard this singing. And just randomly throughout
my life. And it wasn't
life.
A lost traveler stumbled into town and then she starts hearing. There's no trigger to this movie starting.
It was just the exposition of the song was the trigger.
Right, but,
and the fact that
the song is from when they're children, which doesn't,
No. And the exposition of, the story that the father tells, and, he heard this singing of, oh.
But that still is supposedly in their own story, something that they've known their whole life.
This is the exposition, because you're going to hear that later.
In the first movie, people have powers, but it's not really talked about. They go to the trolls and they're like, yes, this happens, but it'll be okay, protect her, whatever. They're not scared of her, they're more ashamed of her. They're you can't show anyone that you can do this, but they're not oh my god, what the heck.
Well, they're scared of what could happen, what she could do with her powers.
Right, but only after Anna gets hurt are they scared, or do they go to the trolls?
Yeah, they knew about the powers before.
They knew about, and they were fine with them. She's making snowmen and they're sliding around, and it's just sort of oh, great, she can do that. Which, if it was actually the world that they're saying in the second movie, where nobody actually has powers, but people can just control the elements sometimes when they're outside, they would have been horrified if this baby suddenly could make ice, when obviously she could do that from when she was very young.
Right.
That would imply that in this universe some people have powers and it's generally okay, but sometimes not. But in the second movie they totally turn that on its head.
Well, they're not magical, they're just using the elements. How is that not magic, first of all?
This is inconsistency in the world building. This is a world that they set up and then twisted in the second one to match the story they wanted, but doesn't make sense at all when you watch back the first movie.
Yes. On that point, the parents...
Oh, yes, the parents.
In the first movie, they paint them out to be terrible people.
Awful. Yeah, the whole reason that they are isolated from each other and traumatized
was because of the parents.
Because of the parents.
The parents brought them to the trolls and be like, hey, what's going on with my daughter? Both of my daughters.
Right, and the trolls are just...
Don't fear it. She needs to learn to control it, but fear will be your enemy. Okay, throw some gloves on her and make her be afraid of it.
Right, and then they die. The last thing they say to her before they leave is conceal, don't feel. They're terrified that she will reveal what she is. That is so traumatic to a kid. That's why a lot of people with the first movie were like, oh, it's like a good gay analogy, because they're like,
Don't
hide
show
it, crush it, and then you get messed up.
So if the mother was so in touch with nature, like they said in the second one, then she would have more like connection with Elsa, and she wouldn't have been so afraid of what she was and the power she had.
The whole plot of the first movie is created because the parents are bad parents. They don't listen to the trolls. They react out of fear instead of intelligence. They cause them to be isolated and messed up, both of them, because Anna is messed up from just living in that house by herself and never seeing fresh air, and Elsa is messed up because she thinks she's like a living weapon.
If the parents were good parents, they would notice that Anna is feeling left out and she doesn't have any friends and she can't talk to Elsa because they don't want her to. They could have at least brought some of the village people to come in and like...
But they clearly don't want them interacting with the public. They're very protective, clearly, because even in the beginning, they're each other's only friends.
Yeah, and even in the beginning, like, you don't see them outside. They're playing inside in the snow.
They actually never go outside. In fact, you know, so much that Anna's like, oh my god, the door's open. I can actually step outside into the town where I've never been before, apparently. You're telling me those are the same people who are like, one with nature.
And we deserve a statue. They were king and queen and they died. Why didn't they already have a statue of themselves built? Like, why now did they need this statue?
They could have done a statue of them as adults and the same message would have come across. Like, they were still the king and queen.
Yeah.
And they died.
I guess it was supposed to be a symbol of peace between the two of them. But
right,
it's
but
like...
it's weird because it's not like
they're king and queen.
Yeah, it's not like they died as kids. The fact that the movie is asking you to sympathize with the parents when the first movie, the parents are really the bad guy. Elsa's not the bad guy in the first movie. The bad guy is the dad for putting all that in her head. And then now in the second movie, the dad is like the hero, and you're supposed to love them that they like were trying to find a cure for Elsa. That's awful. They want to change who she is.
Well, I don't really know what they were looking for. They're looking for answers about what she was, and then Elsa went to go find those answers for herself. And what were the answers? It was just like,
you are you.
It's me. I'm the one, the missing element.
She is desperately trying to find a place where she fits in. She thinks that she's hearing from someone else who's like her, who will understand, and she'll have found her place. And then she gets there, and it's just this weird, convoluted, like, it was you all along. You're just saying she's right, that like there is nobody. Like, I get that, and I think that could have been done in a really cool way if she got there to this river and it's just a regular river. And also, it's another weirdness is you're saying that Elsa is the element, but so she's not human at all then?
What are the elements? One is a salamander, which is only for the purposes of selling toys.
One is just the wind, and it's not anything. It's just the wind. And then one is a whole species of rock people.
And one is a horse. They're like, this was gifted to you because of the bond that your parents had, which is not a good reason to give somebody powers.
Which I also don't like. I don't like the idea that you can only be what your parents did. Like, she can't just be born with powers and then, like, work on them and make it her own thing.
Well, they wanted to give it, like, the point of this movie was, why does she have these powers?
Which we didn't need.
And it wasn't well said.
The whole first movie, there is not a time when you're like, why does Elsa have powers? You just accept it as part of that universe. Yeah. You're like, she has powers, the other one doesn't. Cool, that's going to create tension.
Right.
The things that people were asking about the first movie was not who gave her these powers. You just assume she's born with them, and that's just it. Mm-hmm. Trying to explain them away as like a blessing because her parents were from two different tribes. Like, they're trying to shove the like Romeo and Juliet
kind of
thing into there, but
it was a naive boy looking to the right, sees the wind in this girl, goes over to see her. Oh no, everybody's fighting all of a sudden. I'm dead.
How'd they get out, even? She puts him in the back of a wagon, leaving the woods.
Who left?
What wagon is leaving the woods?
Who left?
They said no one could leave.
Who drove them out?
Yeah, who's driving that wagon?
And whoever did knows the secret that this was planned.
Also, where did she go? Like, okay, she got there to Arendelle. Great. It's like this big of a village. They all know each other. She just show up at someone's house and be like, just pretend I'm your kid. Just pretend.
So at the end of the movie, they make Anna their queen.
Can we make a list of reasons why Anna would be a terrible queen?
First of
so
all,
bad, so bad.
Anna and Elsa are terrible queens. They left their entire kingdom to be run by rocks.
And the rocks, first of all, should not be in this movie, but second of all, don't even give them like tents or anything. They come back and they're still all just standing on the top of the mountain. And if they really had such a developed trade nation, can't they just go somewhere else?
So they say that she's a good queen because the decision she makes to break the dam and destroy the kingdom without consulting the kingdom at all or telling them, hey, heads up, everything you love is going to be destroyed.
While you're just get to stand and watch from that cliff. But also, Anna has been shown time and time again to have bad judgment. She trusts Hans just right off the bat, but also she runs into fire after Elsa. She doesn't think before she does anything, ever. She almost dies at the end of this movie because she's in the middle of the dam when she calls the rock people to throw the rocks. She definitely cannot be trusted to, like, if someone's gonna be like, these people might want to attack us. Or, you know, she's gonna be like, oh man, oh no, I guess we gotta attack them back. She's gonna start a war. And meanwhile, like,
or she's just gonna be like, let them. We deserve it. A good queen would have stayed with the village while Elsa went off to do her thing.
I mean,
although Elsa
she wasn't
was the queen
at that point. She was just princess.
Right.
Also, I don't think it works like that. I think you can't just
also,
pass someone else your crown.
They don't consult the kingdom like, hey, I don't want to be queen anymore, so like, Anna's your next queen.
Can you imagine? You're a villager, right? You're living in Arendelle. You're having a great time, except for some reason the trade has stopped, but we don't worry about that. When one day you're just chilling in your bed and you hear Elsa sing screaming in the middle of the night, and you're like, oh man,
there she goes again.
There she goes again. Something is about to go down. Then you hear a weird noise. You look outside and there's ice crystals just hanging in the sky, and you're like, okay. They fall to the ground. Now the ground starts rippling. You're like, great. This is
another day in Arendelle.
Another day in Arendelle. Like, I was trying to sleep, whatever. All of a sudden, there's no palace guards, so they're not helping you anymore. But the actual princess and queen are out in the streets like, hey guys, get out. You're like, great. You don't have time to grab anything, so you and the seller who now lives in your town, who used to sell things in the middle of nowhere, all go up to a hill. Random troll things you've never seen before in your life because they live in the middle of the woods, nowhere near Arendelle, appear out of nowhere and say, we will take care of you. Then the queen, the princess, their weird talking snowman pet, and the princess's boyfriend leave. Now you are stuck on this hill where you're looking at your town where you assume the ground just like keeps rippling the whole time you're gone. Now for a week you stand up there, the trolls stare at you, you stare at the trolls, they don't eat, they don't give you food, you stand there. A week goes by, all of a sudden a giant wave comes, and then you see Elsa on a weird water horse just swing around in front and stop it and then be like, peace, and then water horse away, and then doesn't ever come back. And they're like, oh no, she's just gonna stay in the woods. And you're like, she's gonna stay in the woods?
She's gonna go live in the woods. Anna's gonna be queen, and we also need to build a statue for our parents.
Right. Like, what happened in that 1 week? Like, okay, here's the plan, guys. Like, I know that our parents have been dead for like 15 years now, but like, it's time. Statue, but not of them as like you knew them as children. This makes sense only to us.
Olaf will fill you in.
Yeah, right. Olaf will do a puppet show in the corner, and meanwhile you cut to Olaf and he's over there like, and then this happened, and they're like, oh, okay.
That would have been a better end scene, like the extra scene at the end.
Oh, it would have if it was Olaf instead of Olaf explaining this movie to the snowman, Olaf explaining this movie to all of the citizens of Arendelle. Like, here's what you missed while you were standing on a cliff. Elsa's whole thing is that she thinks she has to do everything by herself.
Yep.
And Anna's whole thing is that she needs to protect Elsa. And they start to build a thing of how those are both going to go wrong, which would have to happen for character development. Mm-hmm. What they needed to both realize was that they both need each other. Elsa needs to realize she's not alone, she has Anna, and Anna needs to realize that sometimes she has to step back and it's not her place or whatever. Because they both have to be right and they both have to be wrong.
The problem with that is that was what they were supposed to learn in the first movie.
Right, yeah.
And supposedly they did. She opened up the doors, which means she's opening up herself to Anna.
Right.
And Anna...
So they just, So they just lost all that development?
They lost all their
movie?
character development from the first movie.
Yeah, they totally did. You're totally right. They totally lost that. Wow, that was a lot of totallys. How many totallys was that? Put a number somewhere. How many totallys was that?
Totally count.
When we were watching this movie, we got to the point where the salamander sits on her hands and he sizzles, right? How cold must her hands be? Every time anyone touched her for the rest of the movie, we're like, ooh, that's cold.
They hold each other's hands all the time, and I'm like, ugh. If she's always cold, like, the cold doesn't bother her anyway, right?
There's just such a huge contradiction there of the cold never bother.
At the end of the song that's supposed to reveal all the secrets,
right,
it says, go too far or go too deep and you'll drown.
Right.
So she goes too deep, and what does she do? She freezes into ice. She's the ice element, yet she freezes.
I would understand if there had been some sort of explanation that when you get there, your own self will be used against you. If sometimes when you're in a place in a supernatural world, when you're in a place of like horror or nightmare or whatever, your deepest part of yourself becomes your own enemy.
Yes.
So that is what I think they were trying to go for, that like she was getting turned against herself, but it doesn't play like that at all.
I feel like they could have done, in order to get the answers she wanted, she had to push her powers to the limit. And in pushing her powers to the limit, she ended up freezing herself or something like that.
I really think she shouldn't have frozen.
No.
It would have hit way harder if Elsa, whatever, she like pushes herself to the limit and then she just collapses to the ground. If she dies like a regular human, that hurts. You look at that and you're like, oh damn, she's dead. And then Olaf's dying and you're really traumatized, which hits way harder than her freezing, which doesn't make any sense.
Right.
At all.
She's the ice element. There's no stakes in this movie at all.
Right. There's literally no stakes.
At the end of the movie, the wave comes to destroy the kingdom or whatever. And that's supposed to be like a big emotional moment. But I feel nothing. Because they didn't tell me that this town or kingdom was important. They didn't show it to me.
Right. They don't grow up in the town. They grow up in the castle isolated. Kristoff isn't from the town because he's just from the rocks. So there's no connection to the physical town. And that's the other thing. You know the people are fine. They're standing on this mountain.
Yeah, they're not in danger at all.
Should the water really go in, then whatever. They have to rebuild, and the natives help them rebuild.
They needed to show us that this place was important to somebody. It's not important to anybody, as far as I know. They showed us in the Something's Never Changed song that each other is important, but not that their home is important. But there's actually the deleted song that Anna sings about it being her home, that I feel like that would have at least made it more conceivable.
No one is ever in real danger. Elsa freezes, but we know from the first movie that if you freeze, you'll probably be fine. Right. Because Anna freezes and she's fine. Also, can we just talk about the fact that like when Anna freezes, it's very obvious that she's still alive. Like she's definitely alive.
Oh yeah.
She's just frozen. So if that's the same in this movie, even though they're freezing for different reasons, Anna doesn't go to try and find her or anything.
She's just like, she's dead.
Man, I guess she's dead. In which case she would just like starve to death out there because she wasn't dead.
She just assumes. If she loved her, like she supposedly does, she would want to know for sure. And to know for sure, you'd have to go after her.
Right. Which she should have done anyway.
Elsa needed to have to make the decision between finding out the answers to her powers or saving her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously choosing to save her sister because she's more important to her than the answers that her egotistical self needed to find.
She has to realize that the people she's looking for, she already has. She already has someone,
a place that people
someone
want her
who
around.
accepts her and loves her for who she is, regardless of the fact that she's different, and she's always going to be different.
And they kind of showed that at the end of the first one that she kind of found a place. Like they were all ice skating, like they all accepted her.
Right,
She
and
didn't
just
need something else.
undo literally all of that character development for this movie. So let's say Elsa gets there, right? She gets there and there's nothing. Maybe she finds out one clue to solve this bigger mystery. She can't figure out the entire thing, first of all, because no one else ever does anything. She could find out one piece of it, like she could find out that the dam was a trick.
Sure.
But she can't find out that the dam was a trick and that it was them who started it and that it was her grandpa. She finds out every piece. And Anna figures out nothing. And Kristoff is freaking useless.
Ugh.
Kristoff is a whole... We're going to have to get into him. But like, well, not physically. We'll get to him in a second. But Elsa needed to get to that river. Figure out her one clue or whatever that's like just like on the riverbank. Like maybe she gets to this river and it's dry. She's like, why is this river dry? It's supposed to be like the bountiful river. And she realizes that it's because the dam is stopping the river and therefore it's hurting the land and couldn't be a good thing. And she's like, oh man. But then Anna tries to like come and get her and gets hurt or something. Or Elsa gets there and in following this river gets hurt. And Anna has to help her.
Right.
Elsa is never vulnerable. I can't even say it. Elsa is never vulnerable. That would have shown Elsa that she does have to rely on people. Because basically this movie ends and she's like, yeah, so I don't have to rely on anyone. I'm actually really good, you know.
I'm actually the most powerful being in the world.
I'm like some weird alien where my cape just flies for some reason. And I also now have telekinesis and can move things around inside ice castles, which I couldn't do before.
And I can also release all the spirits and all the elements and send out messages to my sister.
Wherever she may be. When they're fighting, like the two of them fight, then Anna is on the canoe and she's angry. That isn't wrapped up at all. When they reconnect, they're just like, oh great, you're good. Like, I forgot that I was angry at you earlier for kicking me out. All of that, it was just not done in a way that advances the story at all.
Or makes them better characters.
They start this movie exactly the way they started it.
And the movie exactly where they started it.
Yes, that would make much more sense. And Olaf has this weird existential crisis thing, which I don't understand. But whatever, we'll move on. We don't need to even go into that.
So, throughout the entire movie, they keep setting up things that we immediately know is going to be something. So, like, the second song, you're like, we love our flag, there's our flag, it will never fall.
Well, obviously the flag is coming down.
Yeah, they do that thing again. They see the dam, and Kristoff says, hey, see that dam?
Like, that would crush all of Arendelle if it went down. Looks into the camera like you're on The Office. Like, man, that sure would crush all of Arendelle. So, since we just brought up Kristoff, should we go into his terrible existence?
I suppose.
Kristoff
has this plot to ask Anna to marry him.
Which, first of all, seems like a bad idea. She clearly doesn't care about him at all. She sings her sad song saying that I've lost everything in my whole life and he's still alive and kicking out somewhere, but she doesn't even consider him.
No. But that also goes into like showing not telling thing, because they like tell us like, oh, we love each other, we're in such a great relationship, but they never show us in that great relationship that they have. Like, I don't know what their dynamic is after the first movie. They just met in the first movie. how is their life now? What are their conversations like? The only conversation I get for them is an awkward conversation
about the first movie.
She's taking everything he says the wrong way, which I guess is supposed to be funny, but it kind of tells me that their relationship isn't too great. Hans's mental their whole mental synchronization. They had that song.
Yeah.
They were in sync. They were
door.
finishing each other's sandwiches. Where's their song?
There's a deleted song, because we were talking earlier about the deleted songs, where Anna proposes to Kristoff.
I love that song.
Which is a better way, because at least if you have to have that plot line, at least then it shows that she does actually care about him. Instead, it's just one-sided the entire time.
And it would give you that, like,
satisfaction of a flip.
Of the Hans and Anna, and then, like, they also have a song together. They're also cute together. They have chemistry, and this is their dynamic. This is their dynamic right there in that song.
I would more believe that Anna would want to marry Olaf than marry Kristoff. Anna and Olaf have great chemistry in this movie. They have many scenes together. She's devastated when he dies.
And ecstatic when he comes back.
Right. And is constantly looking out for him and wondering about him and make sure he's with them when they leave, which is not the case with Kristoff. He left to go do his own thing, and that was clearly supposed to be a point of miscommunication.
Yeah.
Where he was trying to do something nice for her, and she thought that he had left and didn't care. But that's also never re-established or...
After his, like, little song thing of him being lost in the woods.
Oh, the song. Can we get to the song? Are we on to the song?
I liked the song.
The song is a very nice song. It's very fun, it's 80s-y, it's catchy, but the song sets up a lot that does not get paid off at all. Kristoff says in this song, I am nothing without Anna, and then just proves himself right by being nothing without her.
After the song, he's gone. Like, he's not in the movie until the end where he's like, hey Anna, what do you need?
Yeah, what he needed desperately was to be a character in this movie. They have these native people, and they clearly know a lot about what's going on, and they have this one specific native guy who is just like Kristoff, and he can talk to the reindeer the same way, and he's his friend. And he says to him, do you want to stay with us? Because your friends left. It would have been a good idea if he had just actually stayed with the native people and he learned a piece of this mystery from them.
He doesn't help at all with the plot. He's just there.
For this movie to make sense as an ensemble piece, like they were trying to make it, Elsa had to figure out one part, Anna had to figure out one part, and Kristoff had to figure out one part for them all to be important, so that when they get back together, they can share each part that they learned, and then they need to work together with their information to defeat the thing. Instead of just Elsa figures out absolutely everything, Anna just like listens and is like, cool, I guess I'll do that, and Kristoff just shows up again and is like,
what do you need?
Yeah, and that was my biggest thing of how to fix this movie.
I feel like even like their separation could have been better. There could have been an argument between her and him. They were already doing that miscommunication thing, and that's what made them go their separate ways, and then they're both angry at each other.
They have to have some relationship at all. They have no relationship. They have no chemistry. Yeah, and there's no connection.
But that's like the problem with the whole movie. There's no conversation. It's just exposition. They had a story that they were experimenting with, and they tried to fit these characters into the story that they thought of.
It's like fan fiction. The concept of fan fiction is you take a story that you like, and you take characters that already exist, whose relationships are already established and known by the audience, that are put into a story where those relationships are never re-emphasized or explained. So what, in the end... Oh, hello. Hi. What, in the end, is our takeaway from this movie?
It was a beautifully animated movie.
About nothing.
With no story. Like, a sequel should be to expand on the world building that you already did.
Right.
This movie doesn't. It backtracks and it retells everything.
And they added 1 million characters and 1 million plot points that don't add anything, and then they end up just having to explain it all away really quickly at the end, because otherwise they never would have been able to finish it, and also because they hadn't used any of their characters in a way that would allow them to solve it in a natural way.
Do better, Disney.
Yeah, I mean, I think the movie had a ton of potential. The first movie had a lot going for it, and they obviously had a lot riding on this movie. Oh. Dear. On that note, thank you for watching. I'm sure this was really long, and I'm glad you made it all the way here to the end.
Sorry for ranting.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of video, please subscribe because we want to make a lot more of them. And we also would really appreciate recommendations for anything that you think would be interesting for us to talk about. We will pick apart absolutely anything.
All right.
Any last words?
Do your homework.
Bye.